this computer. Cool. All right. So just give me a quick thumbs up. You can see my screen. Cool. Okay, so let's take it from the top of trying to sort of visualize what I want to do. Oh wait, okay. So the interaction that we want to have a look at is navigating to the / bookmarks and seeing some data on the page. So in order for this to happen, we need to be able to set up an application that can respond to a GET request to / bookmarks and return back. This is the response, the request, and down here is the response. The data in this response needs to be some HTML that includes data about bookmarks, whatever is currently in the database. And for this example, I'm going to keep it super simple, and we're just going to have URLs, URL1, URL2, URL3, for example. I'm just going to see a list of URLs on the page. And so that means my application has to be able to have some kind of setup that we're sort of a little bit more familiar now with. That's going to have a controller, specifically a bookmarks controller that listens to those requests. It's going to use our SQLized ORM for the bookmarks model. Bookmark. And then it's going to have some kind of logic for the view that creates all the HTML with the necessary data about the bookmarks. So we'll probably keep this in some kind of views folder about the bookmarks, and specifically for looking at all the bookmarks at the index. So the controller is going to be responsible for getting all this information as needed, and then sending back the response. So for our SQL interaction, we need to be able to have a, we can model it like this, I guess. This is going to be our ORM that then also interacts with our database. So a diagram like this, I know it's lots of multicolored, but somewhat illegible because of my handwriting, apologies. But this kind of diagram is something that you should get comfortable being able to quickly write out for any specific interaction that a user has on a web page. What kind of requests, where does it go, what are the interactions in the application, how does it get fetched information, and we can start to annotate, dive into maybe different parts of it and add specifically like the SQL statements and things like that. But this is at a high level, is the kind of interaction and data flow to be able to get this data on the web page. Let me stay here for a second and just invite any questions that you're seeing when you look at this diagram. What's interesting or confusing about it, and what's great about it, apart from the colors?
It's just interesting to see that for now you've kept the GET and probably the post request on the first page.
So say it again. I've kept the GET request on the first page. Yeah,
because I think yesterday we immediately went towards the second page for it, and the first page was just our button. So cool. Just seeing that right now, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm gonna let the navigation to the URL make the GET request that our application then handles. I'm only going to use buttons in a form submission when I want to create a new bookmark, but I won't do that this morning. I'll just focus on this end-to-end journey. But yeah, great point to raise. You can just use the navigation to /bookmarks as the trigger rather than a form button, for example. Yeah.
I had a question about
the
CMV. How exactly, what exactly happens in the model bit of it, and how is it different from the ORM? Because you've drawn the ORM separately, and I had assumed that they do the same function.
Yeah, really great question. So the ORM here is specifically the adapter or the translation from JavaScript to SQL. That's how I'm trying to represent it here. The map really would be, if they're being a little bit more correct, will probably be something like this. It includes all of the individual models to help you maybe think about it. But not all models need to be backed by a database. So you might have some business logic that you want to represent as a model, but not backed by a table. So frequently you'll see this drawn without that sort of extra box, just like this. Sometimes the different implementations of an ORM with different applications really does decouple them. In the case of SQLize, they are mixed together a little bit. So this hopefully will give you sort of like a mental picture of keeping like the model in one place, and then having to set up the connection to your database using some kind of a middleware like an ORM that initializes all your models, and there is some kind of initialization process that happens.
I'm sorry, you've probably explained this in detail before, and I just can't remember, but what exactly are you modeling? Do you mean model as in like a conceptual kind of visualization of how it works, or do you mean like actual code, and why? What does the code model in that case?
So really great question. So when we talk about models in model view controller, a model represents some kind of a business domain, business logic. So in this case, I'm dealing with trying to create and save and view bookmarks. So I'm going to model that using a bookmark object. And in this case, I want it to persist. So I'm going to make sure I map it to the database table. And that mapping is taken care of by an ORM. So a model is essentially conceptual. It's part of whatever domain that you're working in, the different sort of like nouns and objects that you think should have some sort of state and behavior. So this bookmark wants to be able to have a URL and store that information. And then we represent that in using whatever language that we're using. So in this case, JavaScript is just going to be a JavaScript object or a class.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Good question. If you think back to your rock, paper, scissors or the other challenges, you still had some kind of a model that you needed to interact with, but there was no data persistence. Sort of beyond the application itself. Cool, good, really good questions. More questions at this level? Cool. So let's just go ahead and go through some setup. Okay, so we're in an empty directory. Let's initialize it. I can't be bothered. Yes, that's fine. And I'm going to include a bunch of dependencies. So let's do our test dependencies first. So for this, I want let's just run with Cypress at the moment. Okay, so here I want to Cypress open. Yeah, great. Thank you. Let's set it up so we can point it to our work. Okay, point it to whatever local server that we assume we're running on, and let us delete all this. Go away. And let's call this bookmark manager. Where here I want to let's describe our bookmarks. And here let's do the first interaction which shows all bookmarks. And we need to visit /bookmarks, and then what's kind of a bookmark that I want? I'll think of one in a second. Let's do an actual assertion. Should contain. If I use it this way, I need to think about choosing a specific ID. Let's just say I'll find an element on the page that's called bookmarks, and this should contain www. Bookmark fun. Fancy domain. Okay, so this is going to fail because I'm not running an application yet. Let's watch it fail. Cannot verify the server is running. Cool. So we're going to let this just hang out for a while. So now to think about setting up an Express app. So let's go back to my dependencies, and you're running Cypress, so you can stay there for a second. npm install, and I want Express. I want EJS. Let's say that. A few more that I'll add in, but let's just set up the Express app. Okay, so let's. Oh gosh, we have to do all this, do we? Okay, app.js. I want a folder for controllers. I want a folder for views. I have forgotten entirely how to set up an Express app, so let's go to documentation. Yay. Express, yeah, sure. Let's get you up. Yep. Okay, great. That's not what I need. I need you. Okay, let's get you as a base and have a look at it. Okay, so far fine. I don't really want this here. I'm going to use something like use bookmarks, and then I want a bookmark controller. And what is this controller? And where does this come from? I'm going to create a controllers. Okay, which means I can go back here, grab maybe like this. All right, that's what I did so far. Let's just take you and whack you in here. Bookmark.js. Okay, root to use. I don't care about this. Get index of bookmarks, fine. And I'm going to tell it to go to a certain place. I don't need you. I need a views folder, so I'm going to have a views folder. I guess I'm going to call it something like bookmarks, specifically at the index page. And then I'm going to send it across. Well, here's going to send it some information. And at the moment, something like this, right? Bookmarks, and then here. And this is where I'll hard code for now, and at some point I'll replace. And then replace with database model query. So we can just say something, for example, bookmarks is, let's assume it would be some kind of array that has, what was my test? Okay, so we'll just keep it hard coded for now, and at some point I want to replace this with like a query to find all the data in my database. I guess if I were doing it more accurately, it might be represented like this. URL is like that. That's probably going to be better. All right, I don't want to spend too much thinking about that because I'm going to just replace this anyway. That means I need to have views. Let's go ahead and write a bookmarks index EJS file. I actually need to set out that I'm using EJS. How do I do that again? Express set view engine. Yeah, sure. Are you the one? Yeah, maybe. Not pug though. No dogs allowed. Okay, so let's just double check. It's EJS. I think it automatically checks the views folder. Bookmarks index. I've got nothing here. Let's write a quick page for that. And then the body. What I want to show back, given that in my controller, I'm injecting or embedding JavaScript using the bookmarks variable, which is an array of an object with URL. I want to do something like bookmarks, loop through it, take each bookmark, and you can go there. Thank you very much. In which case, you also need to go here. In which case, what do I want? What I want to happen? Do I need a map? I could just use a for each. Let's just map. Here, I want to have something like, I guess outside of it is where I want the div. If I'm referring back to it, I think I give it an ID of bookmarks. In which case, outside of the loop is where I want to close my div. Okay, so I have one element that I'll create loads of child elements, and it'll be something like, just keep it in paragraphs at the moment. Very classic use of a paragraph, misuse. And here I want where's the tag that I want? This is where I actually want to display it now. Something like bookmark.url. Right, did you hear that? Someone at the door? I'm not sure. Okay. I think I need to go get that. So 1 second. Ow.
How long do you reckon it'll take him to realise he's ID'd it wrong?
It's the same thing he did before.
Oh, dear me. All right, where was I? Okay, so bookmarks index, we're just developing this view with a loop through an array of objects where I take each object and try and extract the URL. All right, this might be enough cowboy coding. We've got one test to cover us at the moment. App.js, go through, we use it. And well, let's just let's have a look at our test. Where is the test? And we need to run the application. Okay, so let's run node app.js. Oh, we get something on the page. Look at that. Okay, so our test is failing. It shows all bookmarks. Visit /bookmarks. We get, and we don't find the element bookmarks. Well, what is it? What is it? What is it? Let's have a look. What does it see? Come on, chop. Get. What is? All right. Sorry for this interruption. The joys of living at a time where it's raining and packages get delivered all the time. I can't leave them outside. Sorry, folks. Okay, where was I? Okay, so I'm trying to have a look at finding the element bookmarks, but never found it. Let's go back and have a look. So here I'm saying get bookmarks, and in my view file, classic case of adding an extra. I think that's what happened last time, wasn't it? Okay. Okay, cool. So I've got an application up and running with a feature test to guide the work that I'm doing, and I'm making research. And so far, it's all hard coded. All right, so my controller action here is hard coded. So now this is where we need to replace this with the connection to a database. So let's comp this out. We'll see this fail. I need to rerun the application clearly. Cool. Oh, bookmarks is not defined right here. So if I leave, well, let's just leave it there because there's no point in seeing it actually fail properly. Okay, so the next step here is, let me kill that for the moment. The next step is to set up a database. Now, this is something that will save you a lot of time. We've been doing it all manually so far yesterday. SQLize as an ORM helps speed things up for you, and it has a interface, command line interface that you can enjoy. Where are you? Is it here? I just want the setup for the moment. What's the easy setup? This is all the commands I have. Here we are. Okay, installation. Make sure you have SQL. Okay, so before I do that, let's install SQLize first. How do I do that? So let's go back to the instructions. Getting started. Getting started. Okay, so let's go here. SQLize, what else do I need? We're using Postgres. So let's grab U2. And what else? Do I have anything else for the moment? Well, let's just do that for the moment. Then I want the SQLize as well, this command line interface tool. We'll see how that helps speed up this process. So here, to create an empty project, I can just initialize using a sort of no package script. So SQLize init, and we can see that it creates a few things. Let's have a look, explore what it just created for us. It created a config file, which gives information about our databases that we'll have to change to access. And so this is 3 different configurations that we may or may not use. Given that we're not putting using production environment, we can get rid of this, but we will focus on using 2 different environments. So it creates a configuration file for us to use. It also creates some migrations, an empty migrations folder. We're familiar with the purpose of this. This is not something that we'll add to directly anymore. This is something that will be generated for us. SQLize will take care of making sure that the migrations are all in order. It also creates an empty models folder with sort of the index.js set up for you. And this is a little bit more complicated, but does the same thing. So you don't actually have to worry about touching this file anymore. You can just let it be. The most important part here is it requires a bunch of dependencies that it needs. It checks what environment you're in. And this is how we'll distinguish between a development environment, a defaults and development environment, or depending on what this variable is. We'll have a look at how we use that. It loads any config that you have in the JSON. So this is where it gets the right set of data, because it looks at using your current environment. So it grabs the right config for your development or your test environment, creates a connection to the database, and then goes through and requires all of your models and initializes them. All right, this require goes to each model and then initializes them. Sets up any associations if needed, and then exports the database connection and the models. So you can just leave this be. This is all generated for you, and how convenient is that? The next step that we have to do is tell the interface how to connect to the database. So let's go to the config file, and you'll change this as you set up the database, your Postgres server, how you connect to it, what username and password do you need. In my case, I've kept it very simple. We just don't need any usernames and passwords. And I want to call this bookmark manager development, I guess. It's quite long, but that's fine. And let's call this our test database. And it's going to be Postgres. Okay. If your database doesn't exist yet, you can just call db create command. It will proper access will create the database for you. Let's try that out. npx, what does it say? Sequelize CLI db create. Cool, database bookmark manager development created. So it loaded the configuration from the config.json. So it went to this file. It looked at the default environment development and then created the bookmark manager development database. If I wanted to create the other one, I need to specify the environment. So I would do node env equals test and set it explicitly in the beginning of my command to say, okay, the environment I now want to operate is in test. Let's set up that database as well. So you can see using environment test, and I've set up an additional test database. It uses a test or development is maps directly to these two keys. If I don't include it, it doesn't know what to do because I haven't mentioned those keys. So if I did like jokes, it has no idea what to do. It takes the keys directly from here. Okay, so I've set up two databases with these names. How far am I along on this? The next step I need to do is creating the first model. Once I've probably configured the CLI config, I can generate a nice model. So let's go ahead. This will be something like bookmark and then attributes. Okay. Bookmark, attributes, and then it has a URL and type string. So this is done automatically, so let's have a look. New model was created at that directory and a new migration. So let's have a look at just what got created, a model file and a migration file. So my model lives in the models folder. Look at that, all nice and easy for me. This is something that parts might look a little bit familiar that we were doing yesterday. I'm not sure why I was split over 2 lines, doesn't need to be. This is using the class syntax, which is under the hood for the define a method that we were using yesterday. It still takes in sequelize and data types to sort of set up your model. It calls init to create the data type string for the URL, gives it a name, and exports it. Cool. That's nice and easy. And then in order to actually send this update or this schema update to the database, because at the moment, well, let's connect to a database and have a look at this data. Let's have a look at connecting to bookmark manager development. Let's have a look at what tables are here. There are no tables, so my database is empty. So in order to actually create the table, I need to run this migration. So you were doing it manually, you're copying the SQL and copying it directly into your database to sort of keep the state of your database the same. Here, it's not in SQL, it's in JavaScript because the ORM will take care of it for you. So we don't need to worry about this. This is all done automatically for you. It's also created the created at and updated at timestamps. And you can see here the URL, which is the one that I want. So this is or done automatically just by using your command line interface. Most migrations you'll see have two parts to them, the up and down, or some kind of change function. So if you need to roll back and undo a database migration, you do the opposite of the up, which is the down. So you can see here, this is a create table, and therefore the down is a drop table, and it does it automatically for you. In the case that we need to roll back and forwards between different points in our database schema, we can, as long as these migrations are generated automatically, they'll have up and down functions that you can run just from your command line to roll back and forward. Okay, so let's go back to this tab and let's run our migration. So how do we do that? Until this step, we haven't inserted anything into the database. We've just created a model and migrations file. And now to actually create that table, let's run this command. Okay, so what just happened is then again, it loaded the configuration. It told us what environment we're operating in, and then it gave us an action and then an outcome, migrating and migrated with this file name. So let's have a look at our database now. You can see here that I've now got a bookmarks table, which is good. I can select everything from bookmarks with capital. Oh, Postgres CLI, you want to downcase everything? Fine. Okay, so ID URL created at and updated at. That's the current state of my table. Notice if I connect to my bookmark manager test database and do the same thing, it doesn't exist because I haven't updated or haven't run the migrations for this database. It's currently empty. So if we visualize this maybe to help, I am having two different databases and at different points I need to tell it what to connect to. So there'll be another one here. This is test. So there are two different databases that, depending on how I set up my application, it will use each one. And I can specify the connection using the key value pair node env, either of test or development. Okay. So if I have that, and now if I wanted to do that, let's go back to this tab. And rather than run the migration, the default environment, always specify at the beginning what environment. If it's not the development environment, what node env equals to test, like that. This will run the migrations in this environment. Cool. So you'll have to remember at times to keep both databases up to date by running migrations against both. Okay. So where are we at the moment? We saw a failing test, and we've got our model. We've got a database set up to it, and now we need to let's go back to our controller here. So what I want to do here is replace this with a query that does something like bookmark.find all. And this will send a query to the table and get all of the bookmarks out. Given this is an asynchronous thing, I'll need to do something like async here and then await. And I need to get bookmark. Where do I get bookmark from? I need to const bookmark is from let's go out one into models, and that should require it. And then out of it, I need to do something like get me bookmark. Do it like that, I think. Let's see. Okay, so we're running our app again, and let's have a look at our Cypress test. What's happening? Try again. Where are you? Okay, so I look at the logs here. It is listening. That's when I started the application. Then it did execute the select query. So that find all is working, but it looks like there's no data in my table. So let's go back to my, let's add some data here just so we can make sure we see it on the page. So let's connect back. Okay, so let's connect back to the other database. We'll talk about that in a second. Manager development. And I want to insert into, that's not like this, it's gonna be like this, insert into bookmarks. What do I need? I need a created, okay, it doesn't like capital, does it? Created at, updated at. So those are the column names that I need to add into. The values are, what do they call it? www.bookmarkfun.com. Okay. I want to see everything from bookmarks. Okay, so I've got one row in here, bookmarkfun.com, created at and updated at timestamps. So now if I run this test again, I should see it on the page and I have a passing test. And let's go explore it ourselves. Localhost. Let's go to /bookmarks. Bookmark fun, yay. Okay. So this is the first step in the journey of thinking about sort of test driving and interactions that have persist data in a database, and how to use the SQLized command line interface to sort of speed up this process to generate migrations and models and initialize your folders for you. To set this up. So the next step after this would be to keep going and writing, sort of figuring out what the sort of creating a new bookmark would look like, what page would it exist on, what buttons would you need to press or type into text, and then what would you see on the page. So you would go through a process where you probably in this router here for the bookmarks, you would add a post request to bookmark and use your bookmark.create to create a bookmark, and then probably render back to the index page with the new bookmarks. You would probably do a create and then a find all to see all the bookmarks. But you might want to redirect to like a different page. But the easiest one would be to create individual bookmark, find all of them again with a new edition, and then send back all of them to your index page to view them. And you can make a test like that. Okay, I'm going to pause here and invite questions.
Yeah, so I have a question on this page. So when you're requiring the bookmark, like the way you do it, like what are you exactly requiring with that? Like after the parenthesis, the bookmark.
Yeah. So when we require this directory, we load whatever is exported here. And so when you go through this loop and you require the individual models and initialize them, we're adding to this database object, which is just an empty object here, the model name, and then setting up any associations, oh, sorry, over here, the model name to be whatever it is. And so if in order to use it, I just have to access the properties. It's stored by bookmark, so I can access it. So this this file here in index.js exports an object that contains the connection to the database, the information from the sequelize module if I need it, and then any models that I need. So if I want to access them, I can do it by the dot notation, say whatever this object, whatever I import it. So as I'm doing here, I have that object, and so I just access it by dot bookmark, or I probably could also do it this way. In order to access the property bookmark and store it there. I think this way is a little bit more declarative. Does that help?
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Really good question.
I had a question. Yep. So should we have a test database and a development database, and what's the purpose of having a test one as well?
Yeah, really good question. So so the purpose of both is test database should be emptied after every single test that you write. There should be no data at the beginning of the test. You set it up as you need with any data in it, and then you remove any data after that test is finished. As we go back to the idea of making sure every test runs in isolation, we shouldn't keep any state in between tests. So that's the idea that's the sort of principle of writing tests. Now, currently, we have no automatic way at the moment, we'll have a look at in the next few days, to clean our database or to set up our database in the right way. So for a test database, that would be the practice. You make sure that it's got no state in it. You only add a state you need to for that test, and then you remove it. The development database is just the one you play around with. It holds any data that you want. Now, Cypress, once you sort of like leads you into testing your development database or testing application that connects your development database. So it's a little bit more blurred when we use Cypress. I would still encourage you to, when you run your app, I would run it specifically in test if you want to run Cypress tests. And that would make sure that connection is set up to the test database where you don't worry about dropping and doing anything that you need to with your data. If you can't be bothered, just run it all in development database and don't worry about it. But this is a feature of the way that we're using Cypress at the moment. When we move on to the next module, and we get into using different frameworks, there'll be a different way of testing this where we do need to have two separate or more than two separate environments. So at a high level, at the moment, the important thing is to know, in principle, the reason of having two different databases. Development is just for you to play around with and do any development work, and you'll keep data in there. You don't have to worry about removing and updating it. Whereas a test database should always only ever have the data you need at the time the test runs. So in principle, make sure that's something that you're aware of and you understand. When we're doing it for the moment, still follow that if you want to, but it's not as important right now. It's about as satisfactory as an answer as I can give you at the moment, because I don't want to add too much right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And also, you know, when you are typing in PSQL and you are inserting in the table,
yep.
You had bookmarks, so the table in quotation marks, and yep. I was wondering why that is.
Yeah, because I don't know, it was just the Postgres command line client is a bit stupid. And it sort of downcased everything that I wanted to. So notice that when I use SQLize to create my table, it creates a table with an uppercase, like capitalized letter, wherever it is here. And instinctively, I don't like capitalized letters in table names. It should always be lowercase, plural and lowercase. But it did that. And so when I tried to select everything from bookmarks like that, it read bookmarks. So it automatically had downcased it. And so in order to avoid that sort of parsing logic, I just explicitly said, this is the name. So the interpreter looks at this as a string and then tries to map it to the table name, rather than read this as some kind of variable that then downcases it first before maps it to the table name. Really, you should be able to, anyway, it's probably something to do with how it interprets different rules for the sort of SQL statements that it makes, but I just think it's stupid anyway. Other questions or more questions, Paulina?
Related to what Paulina asked, on the command line, did I notice when you don't put down the node environment, it automatically assumes it's development?
Correct. And we can see that at the moment in which file is responsible for setting up the connection to the database, Josh?
I can't remember now. I think it's either okay, you point out index, that one.
So in this file, we can see here on line 7. What does line 7 do?
Line 7. I'll go straight to development.
Cool.
Well,
so if it's not set,
either node environment or goes to development. So yeah.
And so we see this this end variable here being used here to say whatever you require out of the config, which is up here, get me the configuration according to that environment. And here you can see the default is this database, and the test is this database.
I assume we ignore the config JSON because it's got username and passwords.
And here, if you needed them, you just hide them in your environment variables. And so you would use a .env file and load them. So definitely check this into version control, but don't check in any username and passwords. Yes. Database names are fine. Well, even that maybe I'd probably still hide, but local and development, so development and test should be fine.
And in terms of naming, you have like three different or 2 files called bookmark. Would you change one to like bookmark controller and one to bookmark models, or does it not really matter?
No, the namespace in the right folders. It's quite repetitive. You keep adding the same folder name. If they weren't in sort of the folders, then I would probably add more information to them.
So when we're having conversation, how do I know which one you're referring to without you explicitly saying the one in the models or the one in the controller?
You can call it the bookmark controller, and then I'll look for in the controls file anything that's called bookmark. So bookmark model or bookmark controller. Yeah, good question. Refer to it like that, but you don't need to call the file like that explicitly if you've namespaced it in the right directory.
I had another question about so yesterday when we were doing it, we had the router function and the like sequelize async await function separate. And then we were kind of like reading the bookmark data from the async function to an array and then putting it inside of the router.
Mm-hmm.
So should they be together like that, or are they supposed to be separate?
So which part did you have in addition to what you see on the screen at the moment?
So when we did the workshop yesterday, we had like the sequelize dot something and then async await, and that was the one that was actually getting the data from the database. But inside that, it was the same, like the bookmark equals bookmark.findAll. It was just like in a separate function, and we didn't realize that the two functions could go together. So I don't know if they are supposed to be separate or if they're supposed to be together like this.
Together like this. So it depends on what you want to do. This is the pattern that's quite common, where within a controller action, you query your model as needed to get information, and then you wait for it to resolve, and then you give it back to your response to send back to the browser. I think I'm still not sure exactly what you're asking for.
I guess I'll just have to show you because I don't know how to explain that.
Cool. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to show now, or do you want to show it after? What do you want?
I don't mind. I can show it now, but I'm disabled from sharing.
Cool. Hold on. I'll. Where is it? Stop share. Try there.
So this is what I mean. We have this function, which is the sequelize sync and then async, and then we have the bookmark router. So we're reading the data from the database in here, but then we also had to somehow get the data out of the function to a global variable and then read it into the router. And this was like the only way we could figure out to get around it being in two functions.
So currently, this gets information one time at when the application loads, and every time it navigates to that index, it won't pull new information. Right? It will just pull the information at the point in time at which you made the initial request of bookmark.findAll.
Okay.
So this works for the first request, but if you were to add more data after the initial application load, it wouldn't then show up because your request, you only ever make one findAll query.
Okay.
So that findAll query should belong in the get the get controller action, so that every request that you make back to the index fetches the newest set of data from your table.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So the sequelize sync is something that synchronizes your models with your tables, checks for any updates. But rather than that, we want to just use the model queries within the controller action. So you can move. Don't worry about lines. The synchronization. Just worry about making sure you move the bookmark query into the controller action. Everything else looks like it would fit.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
Oh yeah, I had another question.
Yes.
So the other day you were saying you want to move every logic to the right. You had the mapping in the index. Is that ideal? Would you try and move that to the right?
That sounds interesting. Can you clarify what you're saying?
So if you have multiple entries into your table, you're using map to display them all on the page using paragraph tags. Is there a way of moving that map to the right so it's in the controller or even further right?
Yeah, good questions. In the view, looping and if conditions are fine. There's no actual logic happening or manipulation. It's just simply a okay. So there's no modification. There's no mutation. There's no data change that's happening. It's simply saying I've already extracted the information that I need. Now just show me the individual elements of it. And this is fine because the other way is a little bit more brittle, where you try and map and then store as state individual bookmark items and then try and represent those in the view. So this is a little bit more dynamic. It says whatever is a bookmark, loop through it and show it. And that's usually fine. You'll see that very common practice. In the same way that like any like message board or Twitter, Facebook with the streams of data, there is some kind of loop that says like goes through and just shows all the items. Cool. Any other thoughts and questions at the moment? Okay. I'm going to end the recording. I'm going to upload it to YouTube. The rest of this morning, well, let's end it now so we don't have to record this part of it.